Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast podcast, your serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm Lauren Buzzio, the managing editor at Wine Enthusiast, and in this episode, we're talking about the rise of organic and biodynamic winemaking in Germany. While it's true that natural wines are increasingly bantered about these days, in cool climate regions like Germany, with highly challenging weather and disease issues, making wines au naturel can be a risky proposition. And yet, many of the country's winemakers are increasingly turning to these wine growing and production techniques in the name of quality and sustainability. Contributing editor Annalie Ijima speaks with Bettina Berklin von Gerazzi of Dr. Berklin Wolf and Hans and Valentine Rebholz from the Rebholz estate, both located in the Pfalz region, to discuss why and how this natural change is happening.
Hello, my name is Annalie Ijima. I'm a contributing editor with Wine Enthusiast magazine, where I focus on German wines. Today we're discussing the biodynamic wine growing movement in Germany. Organics and biodynamics in wine growing often have a mysterious, slightly misunderstood nature, and there are distinct challenges in cultivating wine without the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and fungicides in regions like Germany, where the weather and climatic conditions are often a large and unpredictable threat. Despite this, organic and biodynamic wine growing in Germany has grown dramatically for the last 40 years. In just the past decade, the total vineyard area that is organically farmed in Germany has more than tripled. Today, about 10% of Germany's total vineyard area is now certified organic. One of the leading wine regions within Germany for organic and biodynamic wines is the Pfalz, where the warmer, drier Mediterranean climate and agriculturally friendly terrain have made adaptations to organic and natural winemaking more widespread. Today, we are joined by Bettina Berklin von Gerazzi, whose family has been making wine in the Pfalz as far back as the 16th century. Her estate is iconic in the region, and wines from the flagship Grand Cru vineyards there, like the Kirchenstück, produce some of the world's greatest dry white wines. Bettina is a pioneer of biodynamic wine growing in Germany. In 2005, she became the first German wine grower to join Biodivan, an international syndicate of biodynamic wine growers. Hello, Bettina. How are you?
Hi, Annalie. I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me today. Could you give us a little bit of an explanation on the basics of biodynamics? How does it differ fundamentally from conventional wine growing, and how does it differ from organics?
Oh, this is a very good question, and it could take about 2 hours to explain all the differences. But to cut it short, well, the difference to conventional wine growing, you already said, it's no herbicides, it's no fungicides, it's no chemics in the vineyard at all. So it's a totally natural wine growing, and so this is 100% different from conventional wine growing. The difference to the organic wine growing is that you have the dynamic side, which the dynamic side means that the whole cosmos, the whole sky, everything that is up there in the air is put into consideration. And so everything with the moon, whatsoever, the stars, the planets, everything has some influence on nature, on the people living on Earth. You know, people that, for example, don't sleep very well when it's full moon. So everything has an influence and an impact on us, and so not only on mankind but also on the plants. And so this influence that is in the air, in the cosmos, is being put into this biological and dynamic wine growing. And so we also work with moon decades. We also work with these influence and the constellation of the planets and the stars and everything that is influence the plants and the life on Earth.
Okay. And as an early pioneer of biodynamics in Germany, what compelled you to make this transition?
Oh, this was very interesting because at the end, everything started in New York.
In New York?
Of a friend of mine, and she is a cousin of the very famous Nicolas Joly, who is a vintner from France, from the Loire region, and he is the pioneer and the sort of pope of biodynamic wine growing worldwide. And he wrote a book that is called The Soul of the Wine. And and we found this book in German in her library. And I said, what the hell is this one? And she said, oh, this is my cousin Nicolas Joly. And well, and then we took this, you can take it home with you. And then we took it back home and we read and we said, that's the thing we wanted to do, because I took over the winery together with my husband in 1990. And we sort of took over a very, very big winery with lots of wine and about 1.2 million liters of wine a year on 120 hectares. And in the end, we put it back to 400,000 liters a year on 85 hectares. So
that's a big reduction.
This is a big reduction, and the surface only 1/3, and the whole quantity in 2/3. And there you can see we wanted to go back into the quality thinking that was a little lost in the 70s and 80s in Germany, where the image of German wine lost a lot, and worldwide. And so we wanted to get back to that. And we said, the only thing we can do it is in reduction of quantity and also in working together with nature. And so we were, in 1990, we started this path of getting back somehow into natural wine growing, but we didn't know exactly what to do. And you had to have a little courage to leave all the fungicides behind, the herbicides we didn't use from the 70s on already. But it was in the end the fungicides sort of thought police in the vineyard, and you were scared and afraid not to have them anymore. And what happens if it's a cool year with a lot of rain and things like that? So in the end, we were sort of on a jump into organics when we hit this book. And and we came back and we said, well, that's it. And but where do we find that in Germany, or where do we get some consult from other vintners who can tell us their experiences? And in Germany, where there was no one, even the university in Geisenheim, the wine university in Geisenheim, didn't have a special part where they educated this biodynamic wine growing. And so we said, but somehow in the world it exists, and it exists in France. And as France is not that far, because we are on the southern border to France, to the Alsace region, we said, let's see if there is some nice Alsatian vintner who probably give us some hints about this one. And so we met Marc Kreidenweiss from the domain Kreidenweiss in Alsace. And he was so kind, and we said, you know what, we are Riesling producers in the Palatinate and doing that for ages. And we sort of read that book and we thought that might be the right thing and for us. And could you please tell us if that probably could work in our region? And he said, well, why not? We are not that far away from each other. Our climatic conditions are not that different. And but I wouldn't suggest to, if you have no experience with that, to change the total surface of 85 hectares immediately. But what you can do, you can try on a little part, take 8 to 10 hectares and just give it a try. And I come over and give you and consult and give you some hints how to do and what to do and teach you about all that stuff. And like that, it started.
Was it difficult to convince your colleagues, your family members, your employees? I mean, when you start to talk about the stars and the moon and the constellation, I feel like it's a lot to digest back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Well, it is very difficult because it changes everything you ever heard and you ever did in the last years. And for the people, for the employees, it was first of all, probably they thought, oh my goodness, now they are totally crazy and they want to ruin the whole wine estate and that will never work. But as soon as we started getting into seminars and into education about the whole thing, then you saw that in their heads something was moving, and it did the same with us because we didn't know anything about it, and we had to take the risk in the end. And so we started with Andrew Lauren. First it was Marc Kreidenweiss, and then he said, but now you have to have somebody professional really guiding you for a few years and working together with your people and teach them what to do and so on, because it's this whole compost thing and so on. What in the beginning you have the horn manure, the horn silica things, and well, there are a lot of things changing and getting a totally new point of view, and you look at your plants from a totally different direction. And so yeah, that's how we started. And then the first what happened is that my vineyard manager left immediately, because he said, he was there for about 30 years, and he left without saying goodbye, without taking his rest holiday things. He just screamed and left, because he said, wow, you ruined my whole work, whatever I did. But that was the only one who left.
Okay.
And all the others stayed, and with big eyes and ears. And also employees that have been working with us in the vineyards for 30 years, for 25 years, 30 years. They were really capable to adjust to this totally new perspective and new philosophy in the winery. And I think this was really great. And that's the only thing how it works, because if you are, as the boss, you are the one who decides something that nobody wants in the winery, then you are totally lost, because nobody will get that whole thing through. So so I was very lucky.
What are some misconceptions or misunderstandings that people have about biodynamics?
Oh, what are misunderstandings? I think there are different part of people. First of all, it's the people working in the winery, and then it's the consumer side. For the people working in the winery, they were very afraid that, as I told you, in rainy periods or cold periods, when you have a lot of botrytis issues and things like that, that it could ruin your whole harvest, and the whole work you did during the year, because you don't have any, you think you don't have anything that helps against the diseases. But in the end, what you do is you work, you try to strengthen the plant, and not always to fight against the disease, but to get a strong plant so the plant is capable to fight itself against the disease, and not to always to need chemical stuff that tries to destroy whatever affects the plant. That's the one thing. And for the consumer side, they think that it's some sort of magic stuff floating through the air. And if you tell them that you dig the horns with horn manure, and after half a year you get them out, and yet you spray that on the soil as a sort of information for the life in the soil and things. And some of them say, oh, that's very interesting, and my grandmother did that in her garden, and my grandfather did that somewhere else, and I know that from my grandparents when I was a child, and that is great, and because they always had the most nice vegetables in their garden and so on. And others say, oh, this is crazy, I can never ever believe that in my life. And then you say, what I always said is, if you believe my horn manure things and my horn silica things and the moon and whatsoever, I can't help it, and I don't care in the end. Because if the product is, you like my wine and you think that it has a great quality and it's a high-class Riesling, then I did something very good. Because and the way how I get to this result is, in the end, it's my problem, and it's my task in my life. And I think that is, and that helps some people, because I don't want to convince everybody that a horn digged in the earth and coming out with a horn manure and things like that is something good. Sometimes you can convince them, and in the end they said, okay, I came here and I thought this is some spooky thing you are doing here, but in the end you convinced me today, because that.
So whether it's magic or science, it doesn't really matter as long as the wine is good.
Yeah, and I think we see the results of everything, and we're doing that now more than 10 years. That means almost 15 years now in the end, and or 13 years by now, and in some vineyards even 20 years, because we started in just in the new millennium in 2001. We started with these 8 hectares, and so we've got a little experience since then. And
what changes have you noticed?
well, everything. I think the wines have dramatically changed because the interesting thing we always have our tastings, internal tastings in the winery for the young vintage in February, March. And we were consulted by a sommelier, Frank Kemmer, and we had all the wines on the table, and it was incredible because for the first time in my life, I had you could taste and you could smell and taste the difference in between the different vineyard sites. And before, it was a very nice Dr. Brooklyn Wolf style, which was sort of like a red thing through all your different wines. But here, you all of a sudden, you had the chalky side of the Böhlig, you had the sandstone of the Gerümpel, you had the volcanic soil of the vineyard sites in Forst, and so on. And this was all of a sudden jumping out of the glass into your nose. And this is fantastic because all of a sudden you really could differentiate the different terroirs and the different situated vineyards. And this was really fantastic. And this was just the beginning. And nowadays we have really these 15 top vineyard sites we own. You really can tell this is an Altenburg, this is a Böhlig, this is a Gerümpel, this is a Kirchenstück, a Jesuit garden, Ungeheuer, and so on, and the Pechstein.
Blind. When you taste them blind, you can
almost
tell.
Blind, almost. This is the blind is always difficult, yeah. But you definitely can tell this is a Grand Cru from Forst, and this is something else from Deidesheim, from Rupertsberg, and so on. And this is really great because you can really work out what is in the soil, and you can bring that into the glass. And I always said that, everything I inherited from my grandparents and grandparents is also a lot of nice buildings we have to renovate and the whole time. But the best thing we got is the soil and are these wonderful vineyard sites. And so I think our task is to show everyone what is in the soil and why they are so well known all over the world and so have such a high reputation.
As a result of converting to biodynamics, what kind of changes do you see in the vineyard, in the soils, in the health of your vines?
We see that the vine itself is much more resistant against heat, against lack of water, against a lot of things that have also to do with the climate change, and they are sort of stabilized. They are healthy plants, and they show that. Yeah, they don't have too dark green leaves because they don't have because they are just healthy and they show, and they are not fed with a lot of pumped into with a lot of chemical stuff that makes them show this dark green things that are sort of almost looking artificial. And they show sort of tiny grapes, not too much pressed together. So the whole grape itself, the whole bunch is showing lots of space in between the single grapes. So it can be also very well flooded with the wind and everything, and you don't have this botrytis issue because if everything is very packed and very tight, then during the harvest time, it can't breathe in between and the wind can't get through. So everything that is coming from the rain and so on will stick in there, and you have this process of rotting very earlier than, and then the wind can get through and dry up everything again. So, and this is one thing. Then the other thing is that normally, and this is very astonishing, and this is really shows how nature is working, that the biodynamic grapes are earlier ripe than the conventional ones, which helps us enormously because our harvest is much earlier now than it was in former times because of the climate change. We normally start with our champagne grapes end of August, and in former times we started first week of October.
Wow, so that's a big difference.
And that means because normally now the harvest also in September have quite warm temperatures. That means that you have to get through quite early, and or you have to sort of the grapes shouldn't be outside in this heat too long. So this is great if they're already ripe. And what we also find out that end of September in the last years, a rainy period started. Well, that probably is not all the time like that, but we had this quite hot summer end of August, and then it's gotten into a little cooler, sometimes even hot period, and then ended end of September in a rainy period. And to finish your harvest before this rainy period is always like a little race.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your grapes are not ripe, you can't start harvesting. And so we were very lucky because these biodynamic grapes normally, and that was not only 2 vintages, but also a few more before, that showed us that is very helpful because you can start early and then didn't get into this rush in the end.
Do you think it's more challenging to do biodynamic wine growing in Germany? You know, I think a lot of people used to think, well, Germany is such a cool climate region, you know, there's so much more threat of disease. It's not the best place to do biodynamic wine growing.
Well, I think first of all, we have that climate change, and which helps us a lot because
so
in
it's
the
no
80s,
longer a cool climate.
Yeah, it's not a real cool climate because we've got one vineyard site, one Premier Cru vineyard site, which we say this is our cool climate wine because it's the Altenburg from Wachenheim. And because it's very close to the forest and has a tiny little steepness. And so the sun will be away a little early in the afternoon. So this is our cool climate wine, but all the rest is no cool climate anymore because we had this enormous hot summers in the last years. And well, 2020 was a little cooler maybe as well due to coronavirus or whatsoever. Yeah. We don't know, but we only had 2 hot weeks in August, but the years before we had 8 weeks of enormous heat. And so the cool climate is then far, far away, we must say. And we have to run and rush during the harvest because we don't want to get too much alcohol in the wine. And in the 80s, we were running behind the sugar degrees and didn't get enough. So this has totally changed.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's possible then that biodynamics or organic wine growing could become mainstream methods for wine growing throughout all of Germany's regions, throughout the northern areas in the Mosel or the Ahr?
Well, this is a good question because, well, if you talk to the Mosel or the Ahr vintners, for their steep, it's a lot of work in the vineyards that has to be done. It's a lot of handwork and it's a lot of, you have to go through quite very, very often. And a lot of things are made by hand and not by machines. And if you look at the steepness of the vineyards at the Mosel and at the Ahr, it is much more difficult than in our sort of flat vineyard sites because the biodynamics urges you to be really at the point. If you are too late, then you are really too late for the rest.
The
because you really
paramount.
Timing is very, very important. And you really have to be exactly at the spot. And this is the only very important thing. And this seems to cause a lot of problems in these regions. So I would say, yeah, maybe they can organize or they can also learn in the next decades how to work on that, and maybe there is some path that will be shown and makes it possible that they work like that. What I would say is in Germany, well, the whole of Germany biodynamics would never ever work because if you see all the cooperatives and things. For them, it's much too much work to do. They work in their vineyards 100% with machines. There's no handwork done. It's no selection done. It's the picking is done by machines. Everything is done by machines, and then it's getting difficult to do biodynamics. And it's also a problem of costs. And so because it's quite an expensive wine growing, because you need a lot of manpower.
How much more expensive would it be for you to pursue biodynamic wine growing on your estate, for example? If you were choosing to do conventional, how much cheaper would it be?
Oh, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. It would be cheaper, but the quality would be less good. So in the end, yeah, you have these both sides. Then you have bad quality, you don't get the money for your bottle, and in the end, yeah, the result maybe would be the same, but it is, well, you need, first of all, you need the manpower, and that's the problem. Yeah, and if you don't have the manpower, and you don't have the, yeah, also the reputation or the feeling for quality or whatsoever to make a wine that in the end then sells for a certain price, it is a difficult issue. But we also have, which is very nice, because we are always asked, how does it work? You don't have, well, you have a vineyard here and your neighbor is maybe organic and the other one is conventional, and how does that work? The nice thing is that in the region where our top vineyard sites are, that there are a lot of biodynamics, or at least organic working colleagues. And that makes the thing much easier, because it's, yeah, it's sort of a problem if you have a biodynamic vineyard site and your neighbor then is spraying herbicides, for example. Yeah, which is a little difficult to explain to the customers what happens. Yeah, because there is not a cool, there is not some wall in the soil just telling this is biodynamic and the other one is herbicides. And this is, yeah, so we are very, very lucky and very glad that yeah, the colleagues, because the thing is, I think nowadays, if you want to produce a high quality wine, it doesn't work without organic wine growing. If you don't work together with nature, you will never ever produce high quality products.
So from a consumer's perspective, is an organic or biodynamic wine inherently higher quality than a conventional wine that they could purchase?
I would say to really produce the top of the top, it doesn't work without at least an organic thought, because you need the soil and you need a healthy soil to work together, because it's not you on one side and the plant on the other side and you tell the plant what to do, because the plant is telling you what it's possible for the plant to do. And if you don't be kind and nice to the plant, if you don't treat the plant as it's your little baby, and then it won't give you the quality that you need to produce a high quality wine. And the quality doesn't start in the cellar and not with the winemaker. The quality starts outside in the vineyards. And if the winemaker doesn't get the highest quality grapes, he will never make a high quality wine out of that. So,
and when you assess quality from a tasting perspective, you mentioned earlier that you felt like changing to biodynamics had given your wines a greater sense of expression for site and for soil.
Yeah.
How else do you think a consumer can assess the quality of a biodynamic versus a conventional wine?
It is very complex. You have really a bunch of aromas, of smell, of fruit, of plants in your mouth. And you have a very, very strong backbone. That means that the wine really shows that it consists of thousands of little things which were put together to one big ball. And it also tells you that this will last for ages, because it's not this prime aroma thing that will last. You smell into a young wine and it's overwhelming because of its aromas, and a year after it's gone, because there are no second longer staying aromatic things in the wines. And that's what we try to produce. We try to produce long lasting Rieslings, and our top Rieslings will age forever. Yeah, and if you today taste our 1994 Reiterpfad from Rupertsberg, which was our first Grand Cru we produced in the winery, this is still a young wine. Yeah, because it's now 20 something years old, 25 years old, 26 years old, and it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible because it's still so young, and this comes because there are so many ingredients in the wine, and they can only be there if you treat your plants nicely, and if you make it possible that the roots, for example, go deep, deep, deep into the earth. So if they don't get deep and they are only in the first 10 centimeters or something of the soil and they wobble over there, they can never get the wonderful things that are down there in the stones, in the soil. And that is also very important because we had a lot of dry years, some very, very dry years. And our plants in the Grand Cru vineyards didn't suffer at all because the roots were so long and they went so deep into the earth, a few whatsoever decades of meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters. So they always had water. And so this is important as well. And this you can't change through irrigation or something. You irrigate on the top, but it's not the same if you irrigate from the top or the plant is getting the water from the soil directly from down there in the soil. So, and yeah.
Well, thank you. You've given us such a powerful testimony for why consumers should consider organic and biodynamic wines. Bettina, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your knowledge.
Thank you very much. And I think it's our task also for our kids and for the future to keep this nature healthy. And I think this makes us as well very, very happy. And and we love being vintners much more, even through our biodynamic issue that we try to bring upon the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bettina. Hello, my name is Anna-Lee Ijima. I'm a contributing editor with Wine Enthusiast magazine and specialize in German wines. Today we're discussing the organic and biodynamic wine growing movement in Germany. Organic and biodynamic wine growing in Germany has grown dramatically for the last 40 years. In just the past decade, the total vineyard area that is organically farmed in Germany has more than tripled, and today about 10% of Germany's total vineyard area is now certified organic. The Rebholz estate, with a history of over 400 years of winemaking in the southern Pfalz region of Germany, produces some of the world's greatest dry Riesling, as well as fantastic Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, and other grape varieties. We are lucky to be joined today by Hans and Valentin Rebholz, who work with their parents Birgit and Hans-Jörg Rebholz. They'll be speaking a little bit about their estate, their wines, and their wine-growing philosophy. Hello, Hans. Hello, Valentin.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Rebholz is one of Germany's most pioneering organic and biodynamic winemakers, certified organic since 2005 and practicing biodynamics since 2006. A key tenet to their wine growing is the promotion of a healthy ecosystem and protecting the environment, foregoing the use of herbicides, synthetic fungicides, and mineral fertilizers. So, Hans and Valentin, what inspired your family to pursue organic and biodynamic wine growing?
Our family has a really long tradition in winemaking, but after the Second World War, our grandfather Eduard Rebholz joined the winery, and he was a studied forestman. And in the forestry, it's absolutely normal to work sustainable. But in this time, it wasn't usual to work sustainable in agriculture because everybody uses synthetic fertilizer and different other materials to harvest as much as possible. And our grandfather, he has a completely different philosophy of agriculture and also of winemaking. And he starts to work with different cover crops on the soils, with different training systems to increase the quality here in the region. And he was also a pioneer here in the south part of the Pfalz for natural winemaking. It's a little bit different in detail what's actually natural winemaking, but since his generation, we never add different finings in the wines. We don't add Süßreserve in our wine, so we work in a really natural way. And this was one of the reasons why we changed to certified organic and biodynamic in 2005.
And has shifting your wine growing to organic and biodynamic practices been a big change for you in terms of what you do in the vineyard or what you do in the cellar?
Yeah, I think we work since a long time in a really natural way, but after that time we changed over to certified organic, and also then in 2006 to biodynamic wine growing. It changed a little bit because you recognize that you have only one chance to work perfect, and you don't have in the bag another treatment where you can save your crop or something like that. And so it changed a little bit. We have now more manpower. We look really on the weather, also on the growing situation in the vineyard to work perfect in time, and that is, I think, the biggest difference. But for us, it was not too hard and not too challenging to change over, because we work since a really long time in a close way, but not certified. And so, for sure, a big part is the documentation of this German organic
or European.
European.
Has this shift to organic and biodynamic practices resulted in a change in quality?
Yes, this was one of the reasons why we changed to biodynamic, because with climate change and with better weather conditions, you have every year a little bit faster vegetation, and in our philosophy and in our wine style is a very pure style of wine, and we don't want too much sugar and too much extract, and so we changed to biodynamic to have a little bit earlier ripening, but yeah, without too much sugar and grapes, and with more minerals from soil, and yeah, it's a completely different juice.
So, do you think the actual taste, the aromas, and the taste sensation of the wine is different?
Completely different. Especially, we think that the clearness, the preciseness increase a little bit, and especially also the a light reduction and a light herbal taste and herbal nose increases in the wines. That's also a thing other wineries, friends of us who joined also to biodynamic, felt in their wines. Yeah, I think especially the minerality and the structure of the wine changes. You have a complexer mouth feeling, a longer finish, maybe not the extreme fruit in the first years, but we think a much better aging potential, and also much complexer wine.
And what do you think causes these changes?
I think it's a thing of the healthiness of the wines. They produce only as much fruit they can and not more, and we don't reduce the yield in a direct way. We want to have a moderate growing in the vineyard by nature. We work more with the soil, or with the humus, with compost, with some teas, to regulate that, and we want to regulate it indirect and not direct in the wine. And so I think we all think that the wine is more strong against some bad weather conditions, for example. For sure, when you plant a new vineyard in the first years, in the first 5 years or something like that, or also when you take a vineyard over from other winery, you need some time to change it. And I think the biggest challenge is to make the soil alive again, because sometimes you buy a vineyard where the wines looks good, but when you look in the soil, there's no life, no roots, and no humus, and so that's one of the biggest thing and one of the hardest thing, and one of the or it is the important thing we have to do to have a really good soil, and a soil which is alive. And
Okay.
compost is the most important thing here to start this process.
You mentioned a little bit about the weather, but what are the greatest challenges to organic and biodynamic wine growing in Germany?
Yeah, but here in Pfalz, it's a little bit easier than in other regions, because most of our vineyards are flat or not really steep, and so for us it's not a big problem to work without herbicides, and it's it's a little bit easier for us, because we can work much faster in the vineyard than other winemakers in other regions, for example in the Mosel. And I think the challenge here in Pfalz is not really big, and this is also the reason why here in the VDP Pfalz we are more than 90% certified organic.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and and we have a really big respect for all other guys who work in really steep slopes, like Clemens Busch, for example, in the Mosel. He's a completely crazy guy. He has a completely different challenging to work organic because of the soil management, for example, to work without herbicides or anything else. We can do it with a tractor, or also by hand with the smaller machines, and then they have to do everything by hand. Nearly everything by hand. Yeah, and so for us, we have to work with other problems. We have to deal with the climate change, with the warmness, also sometimes with the water situation, and that is our challenge here in this region.
Can you give us an example of a recent vintage where you had an issue, like you said, heat or too much sun, where having to use organic and biodynamic practices were difficult, where you wished maybe you were a conventional wine grower, that you had other ways of dealing with challenges that you had in a specific vintage?
I think the German winemakers learned a lot in the last 20 years. 2003 was the first vintage here in Germany. Yeah, you have a big impact in climate change. In before 2003, it was absolutely usual that the best wineries pick their grapes as late as possible, to have as much sugar as possible. But in 2003, some do it in the same way, and then after the harvest they notice, oh okay, it's a little bit different, because the acidity was much lower, the alcohol was is much higher, and so they notice, okay, we have a big change in climate and also in heat. And in 2003 it was enough water, or a little bit more water than in other years now. But so they notice this change, and they start to learn. And I think since 2003 we learned a lot with these new situations. In the last 3 years, or the last 4 years, we have no challenge with botrytis or with rot in the vineyard, but we have problems in harvest sometimes with dryness. And I think in the last 10 years, so between 2010 and 2020, we have nearly 3 years with a similar situation than 2003. But we
Where there's not enough water.
Yeah, and it was extremely hot, like 2018, 15, 11, and also also in the beginning of the 20 vintage, it was also quite hot, and then it changed totally onto a classical cool climate German vintage. Yeah, but the situation in the vineyard is completely different to 2003. And also in our vineyards, the situation is other than in a normal farmed, in a conventional farmed vineyard. When you have our vineyard starts when they recognize, okay, the water situation gets dangerous, they start earlier with a really nice ripeness. And then we can pick ripe fruits, and that's the difference to other vineyards or the conventional vineyards. That is, that's the most important thing, to pick early, but the grapes have to be ripe enough.
And do you think maybe that your organic and biodynamic practices might be making it easier to deal with drought conditions?
Yeah, not easier, but I think you can produce higher qualities because our vineyards are a little bit more resistant against these extreme weather situations. Our vineyards are no bodybuilders, but our vineyards are a little bit more like a marathon runner, yeah? And so we can pick nearly in every year in the last decade extremely high qualities. I think the qualities in the last 10 years are absolutely incredible in some difficult vintages. And
Hmm.
at the moment, we are really happy with the weather today or in the actual time, but we hope that it changes not too fast in the next years. And we work a lot with our soils to improve them, to have a better water holding condition. And it's a big theme, and it's a great thing to discuss with other winemakers about that.
Hmm. So, a lot of the work that you put into creating soil vitality is what helps you to train your vines to be more like marathon runners, to give them the strength and the resistance to withstand hot conditions during drought years.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing in for every agriculture in not only for winemaking, to increase your soil with organic in an organic way to save them, because you have only one soil. And we work since generations on the same ground or with the same soil. And so
Mm.
it's our part of our generation to give this soil healthy to the next generation. And
Hmm.
in a way, they also can use this part of land and this soil with the climate in 50 years, and we don't know how is the climate in 50 years, and so we protect the soil. Yeah.
And what are the big differences between your style of farming and a conventional wine grower?
I think it's easy to understand when you use a mineral fertilizer. It's like you bring salt to your soil, and a salt it's destroying the life in the soil, and it makes the soil nearly impossible to hold enough water. And when you have no water in the soil, you have also no life. Yeah, it's a circle of death. Yeah, you start with one thing, and in the end, you have to work against the problem you brought to your soil. And yeah, that's sometimes it's a human problem to work on the problem and not on the reason of this problem. And I think to do less bad things, it's sometimes less work, and it makes your life easier in the end.
So, in the short term, a chemical fertilizer might help to strengthen your vines, but in
Yeah,
the long run, it's actually damaging the longevity of the
yeah,
vines
yeah,
and their ability to produce good wines.
yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's possible for organic and biodynamic wine growing to become mainstream throughout Germany?
We hope, because for us, biodynamic and organic is not a part of our marketing. Biodynamic and
Hmm.
organic, it's for us a way of or it's a part of our production. And I think for the whole region and for the whole German wine market, it would be positive to have a mainstream in organic and biodynamic. If you look on a region like Jura, in this region they are produced, it's nearly the same like here in the Pfalz.
Do you think that, you mentioned earlier it's more difficult in areas like the Mosel or perhaps the Ahr, the northern regions with cooler climates? Do you think it's possible for much more of the Mosel or much more of the Ahr to also assume organic and biodynamic practices?
I think the climate is not a problem. The coolness of the climate. The biggest problem is these extreme steep vineyard sides, and it would be possible, but the costs of the wines would be much higher, or it's necessary to increase the prices in regions like Mittelrhein in Germany, the Ahr, and also in the Mosel. That's a completely crazy thing that in the Pfalz we have a really nice wines and a good value. And when you go to the Mosel, sometimes we both think it's not possible for the winemaker that they earn enough money to pay the family members enough, or the true costs are higher than the prices of some wines, and I think that would be only possible with higher prices and with less quantity.
Typically, how much more expensive is it to operate a winery biodynamically or organically compared to conventional farming costs?
I think the biggest influence in costs are the little bit lower yields, because our yield in our winery is, I think, only the half of the normal yield here in the region. But we are focused on producing absolutely premium wines, and if you compare it with a normal organic winery here, they have a little bit better yields than our winery, but it's a little bit lower than a conventional winery, and this is the reason why the costs are higher. But in a easy vintage with good weather situations, you can produce in nearly the same costs than a conventional winery, because the materials you use in organic, they are often cheaper than the conventional materials, but you need more manpower and more time. And the most important thing is to do in organic and biodynamic wine growing. You have to do all of the works on the perfect date, on the perfect time.
So timing is crucial.
The timing is the most important thing. Yeah, and if you have only some workers in a big winery, it's impossible to work in every vineyard on the perfect day. And this is the reason why we have in our small winery much more people than in some other wineries, because it's necessary for us to do every work on the perfect day, and not only in our best vineyards, also in some vineyards we use for entry level, because you need for every vineyard, if it's in the best vineyard side or in a little bit normal vineyard side, you need the same hours of work and you have the same costs.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier that marketing of, the biodynamic and organic wines has never been part of your winery's identity. And in fact, if you look at the bottle, it's not written on the label organic or biodynamically produced. But I feel like it's always in the back, behind the scenes. It's always been a very important part of what you do. In recent years, in addition to the Biodivin organic certification that you received, the estate also joined the newer biodynamic association called Respect Biodyn. Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose to become a member of this new association?
Yeah, the main reason was the great people behind the Respect Biodyn organization. It's a smaller group when you compare it to Demeter or Biodivin. and it's a really nice group of high-end winemakers. Only high-end winemakers.
Yeah, and it's not only a certification in biodynamic, it's also a sign for high quality. And this was the reason why we joined to Respect, because in our philosophy our philosophy is we want to produce high quality wine and not a biodynamic wine. We want to sell a high quality wine which is biodynamic, but not a biodynamic wine and the taste is a little bit
So this is a very exclusive association. You have to get an invitation to join and a sponsor to join. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We have a great connection to these nice wineries in Austria where Respect Biodyn was found, and we met them because of some events several times per year. And then there is a group in Germany of biodynamic winemakers, the Wittmann Estate, for example, Clemens Busch and Christmann, and we're looking for association to get a certified biodynamic, because we think it's really important to be certified to increase this movement and to make it stronger. And then you have also it's more precise when you are really certified. And so we are looking for the perfect group we want to join. And then Bernhard Ott was saying, okay, why you don't join in our group? And then we said, okay, we never thought about, because before it was only an Austrian group, and then they said, okay, maybe we open it also for our German friends, and then it starts, and now we are 7 members in Germany, high-end producing wineries, and it's a great time when we have normally not in COVID times. We have 2 dates per year when we met all of the guys, and we have
workshops together,
biodynamic workshops together. Also, we invite some wineries who are interested, or we are interested in them, and meeting new guys, and talk a lot about the biodynamic movement.
And how does the Respect Association differ from other certification programs? Does Respect also issue its certification to you?
Yeah. It's a Respect is a certification, and we have the same law like Demeter.
It's exactly
the same. But Respect is not only a certification in organic and biodynamic production. It's also a certification for high quality.
I see.
Like it's a little bit like the VDP. It's you can't write a letter to Respect and say, oh, I work in your law and I want to join. Respect asks you, and if you are in contact with other people from Respect, and it's okay, then you can join this certification. It's not only a certification by law. For us, the group of the people is also really important, and not only the way how you work.
The community.
The community is also really important. That's the biggest difference to Demeter.
Well, thank you so much for this incredible introduction to your wineries. I have so many more questions to ask, but hopefully we can catch up again sometime in the future.
Yeah, yes, we hope also. With pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
There's clearly a lot of thought and consideration that goes into wine growing and making. But for these family-run wineries, there's a lot more at play. For some, converting to organic or biodynamic winemaking is a must-do labor of love, and it's hard to ignore the passion expressed not only for their own sites and bottlings, but for the wines of the country as a whole, for the authenticity that they can represent, and the respect for the land that yields them. Subscribe to the Wine Enthusiast podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you find podcasts. If you like today's episode, we'd love to read your review and hear what you think. And hey, why not tell your wine-loving friends to check us out too? You can also drop us a line at podcast@winemag.com. For more wine reviews, recipes, guides, deep dives, and stories, visit Wine Enthusiast online at winemag.com and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Wine Enthusiast. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Lauren Buzzio and Jenny Groza. Until next episode, cheers.